Last year in Miami, I experienced the home crowd turning against me, and I kept wondering where all these people came from. Jessica Pegula, the reigning Dubai champion, and a veteran who has competed on 4 continents, found herself wide awake in her hotel room during the 2026 Dubai Championships. It wasn't pre-match jitters keeping her up, it was the volume. You can hear the roar right through the hotel walls, especially at night, Pegula said. It is incredible. The twist, the fans weren't cheering for a finalist. They were screaming for Alex Eala, who had already been eliminated, yet the decibel level for her eclipsed the noise for the actual trophy winner. Now the scene shifts to California, where former pro Chris Eubanks is live on air at Indian Wells with a warning organizers must put her on a stadium court before the crush of fans causes a safety hazard. The way her nation mobilizes is unlike anything else. To really grasp the magnitude of the next 48 hours, you have to rewind exactly 14 months to January 2025. Back then, Alex Eala was 20 years old and sitting at number 147 in the world rankings. She was a blip on the radar to the mainstream, a wild card entry from a nation that in the 53-year history of the WTA had never produced a single top 100 player. That changed on March 31, 2025. She stormed the Miami Open, dismantling Grand Slam champions Jelena Ostapenko and Madison Keys back-to-back. In the quarterfinals, she stared down world number 2 Iga Swiatek. The final score was 6-2-7-5 against her, but the stadium didn't care. It transformed into a sea of Filipino flags, and the roar was loud enough to be heard in Manila. Before Swiatek even made it to the showers, a chain reaction began. Over the next 9 months, Eala didn't just build a career. She rewrote the history books for Philippine sports. She became the first Filipina to crack the top 100, the first to lift a WTA trophy at the Guadalajara 125, the first to win a main draw Grand Slam match, and the first to break into the top 50. She shattered 8 separate records, kicking down doors that had been bolted shut for more than half a century. She unlocked every achievement in a single calendar year. By December 2025, she was on the cover of Vogue Philippines, posing for a Nike campaign with her racket wrapped in the national flower. Then came the ultimate stamp of approval. In November 2025, Rafael Nadal retired since November 2024 and absent from the court for a full year, stepped back onto the clay at his academy. He chose one specific moment to reconnect with the game he spent his life dominating. He chose to hit with Alex Eala. 1 year later, it felt great to be back, he said. The legend who built the very academy where she spent 7 years carving out her footwork returned to the baseline specifically for her. Now she arrives at Indian Wells 2026 ranked 32nd in the world and seeded 31st. She is the first Filipino seed in the history of a WTA 1000 event, and the tournament is already bending over backward to handle the chaos she brings. But that recognition wasn't handed to her. The establishment had to be dragged there one mistake at a time. The wake-up call happened in January 2026 at the Australian Open. Her historic main draw debut was shoved onto Court 6, a tiny venue for qualifiers that holds about 14 people. They didn't expect a crowd. Instead, hundreds of fans were locked out lines, snaked through the precinct, and officials had to issue a public apology for the overcrowding. Journalist Ben Rothenberg put it bluntly in his newsletter. The throngs waiting in vain proved that 20-year-old Alex Eala is arguably the most popular player in tennis right now. How did the institutions respond? More bad logistical calls. During the Middle East swing in February 2026, the tour initially gave her terrible time slots. The backlash was instant. The Tennis Gazette later reported that the tour finally made the right scheduling decision, with that one word doing a lot of heavy editorial lifting. That brings us to March 2026. Chris Eubanks isn't using the word safe as a metaphor on live TV. He is issuing a genuine warning about crowd control. It is Chapter 3 of the same story playing out in real time. You can't measure this phenomenon in a spreadsheet. You have to ask the witnesses. In 14 months, she rocketed 48 spots up the rankings, going from an afterthought in the draw previews to the headline attraction on the Tennis Channel. The hype was palpable inside the Indian Wells venue before a match time was even set. Put yourself in Jessica Pegula's shoes at Miami 2025. She is in the semifinals, playing in her home country, in her home state, in front of what should be her home crowd. She is a top 5 player, yet she walks out and feels like the visitor. I was in Miami playing against another American, but the stadium was packed with Filipinos, Pegula recalled. I'm thinking, where on earth did they all come from? She won the match and made the final, yet she still talks about the noise rather than the victory. This fan army wasn't recruited at Indian Wells or Dubai. It arrived fully formed, backed by 110 million people who had been waiting generations for this exact moment. The queue outside Court 6 at the Australian Open 2026 became the defining image of her star power, a snapshot of institutional blindness colliding with die-hard devotion. A Reddit photo of that overflow line went viral instantly. Rothenberg didn't call her an up-and-comer. He called her the most popular player in the sport period. But fame has a dark side. After Eala lost that three-setter to Alicia Parks on that undersized court, the mood shifted. The same internet army that rallied for her turned toxic, flooding her notifications with hate. Four-time Slam champ Kim Clijsters addressed this specific pressure on her Love All podcast. She took a lot of heat from her own fans and the Philippine community. Clijsters noted highlighting the unique burden Eala shoulders at such a young age. Eala's response wasn't a press release. It was a grueling schedule. From the Abu Dhabi quarterfinals to Doha, then Dubai, where she took down top 6 player Jasmine Paolini and Sorana Cirstea to reach the quarterfinals of a WTA 1000 event. Although she fell to Coco Gauff 6-0, 6-2, the scoreline was deceptive. Gauff publicly thanked Eala's fans for bringing new eyes to the sport. Meanwhile, Pegula was back in her hotel room, unable to drown out the chants not for the tournament but for Eala. On the Nothing Major podcast, Steve Johnson, John Isner, and Sam Querrey, tallying a century of experience between them, tackled the big question. Is Eala a bigger draw than Sabalenka or Gauff right now? Johnson didn't hesitate. Yes, dude, it is crazy. He compared her to João Fonseca, the Brazilian teen who electrified the men's tour the previous year. She is having that same effect, Johnson said. Every court from Australia to Dubai is standing room only. It is massive. Isner chimed in on the business side, noting the industry was slow to catch on. People underestimated the size of that market, Isner said. They finally have a legitimate star. Querrey, keeping it simple, added, if she wins a slam, it will be one of the biggest stories in the world. That conversation happened 9 days ago. Now she's at Indian Wells, right in the backyard of nearly 2 million Filipino Americans. Paul Annacone guided Pete Sampras to 14 major titles and Roger Federer to another 6. Between those two legends, he possesses a deeper resume of Grand Slam coaching success than anyone else in the men's bracket. He has witnessed firsthand what happens when an athlete transcends the mere scoreboard. He was on set at Indian Wells this week for Tennis Channel Live, and when the topic shifted to Alex Eala, his assessment was telling she has the kind of charisma that just electrifies the entire venue. That is not a standard scouting report. That is a veteran who has watched 20 majors won from the player's box, telling you that her it factor cannot be quantified by shot velocity or serve stats. However, the weightier seal of approval came from Kim Clijsters. As a 4-time Slam champion and former world number 1 from Belgium, she has no patriotic or personal motive to hype this story. Yet she watched Alex Eala and bypassed tennis analogies entirely. She reached for the biggest icon in American athletic history. She has to handle a life similar to being Michael Jordan in the Philippines. It is vital she gets shielded from that level of mania. A Michael Jordan comparison that is the bar a 4-time major winner set for a 20-year-old currently sitting at 32nd in the rankings. She meant it less as hype and more as a caution regarding the crushing expectations. Indian Wells attracts nearly 450,000 fans over a fortnight. It is the massive giant outside the majors. Stadium 1 seats 16,000, and organizers have run this show for decades without ever facing a logistics nightmare caused by sheer popularity. Well, the facilities team is facing one today. California holds the highest density of the Filipino diaspora in the United States, with roughly 2 million people living within a drive of the tennis garden. This same fan base, which tracked Eala's climb from 147 to seeded contender from the qualifying bubble to the main stage of the sport's biggest non-major, finally has a tournament nearby where their physical numbers can match their digital volume. The rankings have not quite caught up to the narrative. Sitting at seed 31, she hasn't even reached the finals yet. She has not claimed a Grand Slam trophy yet. The women who have won majors are the ones fielding questions about her during media availability. On March 6th, Eala faces Diana Yastremska in the round of 64, marking her first competitive match at this prestigious event. Should she survive that, a potential round of 32 showdown looms against Coco Gauff, the very same Gauff who handed her a brutal 6-love, 6-2 defeat in Dubai just 6 weeks back. Following this is Miami in late March, the city where this entire phenomenon ignited back in 2025. She heads back there not as an obscure wildcard, but as a seeded threat defending the performance that shifted the landscape. The sports hierarchy is still racing to grasp what they have, while the fans who discovered her at 147 have known the score for ages. The world is finally realizing what you already saw. Her Australian Open defeat to Alicia Parks played amidst the bedlam of Court 6 and lost in 3 sets after a 6-love opener marked Eala's Grand Slam main draw debut. That match belonged in a stadium. Instead, it swamped a small venue so quickly the crowd control became headline news. Afterward, Eala took to Instagram. 3 weeks of battling with pride and love ends here in Dubai, she wrote, and in a follow-up she cited fellow Filipina player Sabrina Santamaria directly. It is a privilege to play for people who see their own reflection in you. She then appended her own thought. I could not agree more. What a gift to pursue what you love with love. She made no mention of the vitriol. She focused entirely on the honor. That is not ignorance. That is a 20-year-old who fully comprehends her burden and decides to hold it with grace rather than anger. 7 weeks on, she lands in California as a seed at a WTA 1000 tournament, the first Filipino in history to hold that distinction. There is a noise level here that Jessica Pegula found impossible to sleep through. There is a court that journalist Ben Rothenberg described as a ludicrously limited stage for the sport's biggest draw. There is a legend named Rafael Nadal who stepped onto a practice court after a year-long retirement, grabbed a racket, and rallied with the very prodigy his academy produced. There is a ranking list that showed number 147 just 14 months ago now displays 32 and clearly isn't done climbing. Alex Eala did not simply crack the top 32. She mobilized a global community, forced a rethink of match scheduling, and it compelled an icon to drop a Michael Jordan reference and carved out space in an industry that didn't have a spot for her until she created one. The establishment assigned her Court 6, so an army swarmed Court 6. Now Chris Eubanks is on live TV from Tennis Paradise begging officials to upgrade her venue so nobody gets crushed. Indian Wells 2026 hasn't even hit its peak yet, but the industry is asking the vital question. Is this facility actually large enough for the movement she brought with her? Here is the query for the viewers right now. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Does Alex Eala take the Indian Wells crown in 2026? If she pulls it off, does that rank as the single biggest feat in Philippine sports history? With every entry, the pressure mounts. With every scheduling error, the fan base gets louder. The next phase at Indian Wells kicks off March 6th. If you have tracked this saga since Miami 2025, since rank 147, since the Swiatek shocker, since the Court 6 qualifying madness, then you already understand. This is the crescendo the entire arc has been leading toward. Hit subscribe and keep locked on this narrative because the next 48 hours in the desert are about to provide conversation fuel for years to come.